All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. I have the Livingston County Sheriff, Mike Murphy, joining us today. And, I'm just super excited to discuss so many things that have taken place in 2020, his life as a law enforcement officer, and just a lot of the stuff that I feel like many people want to hear about. So right before we get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces struggles transitioning from active duty back to normal civilian life, and VetLife's there to ease that transition. The easiest way to reach out to VetLife is to do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, Mike, for the people that don't know you, were you born and raised here in Michigan? And let's talk about what led you into, becoming a law enforcement officer.
Yeah, so actually I was born and raised in Michigan. I was born in Lansing, grew up in Williamston. Graduated from Williamston High School, and then ultimately came here. I graduated high school in '85, graduated the police academy in '88, and had a couple of small police jobs with Weberville, Perry, and Williamston before coming over to the sheriff's office in 1990. And life's been great that way. Yeah. So.
Right before the podcast, you were telling me that as a young man, you experienced two extremely different interactions with law enforcement, right? And that kind of put you on a path to say, you know what, there's an ability to make an impact here, because I felt one side and how it made me feel and how I felt treated. And, we embody the rights in this country. We believe in the Constitution, but those are only as good as the people that enforce them. You know what I mean? If someone was to strip you of your rights, you don't possess them.
Right.
You want to go a little bit into those stories and then talk about, when that moment was when you said, you know what, I know that this is my path, and I know I can make an impact here.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up, I moved to Williamston and started in the 5th grade. So prior to that, I was in Lansing and lived on a dead-end street. So as a kid in Lansing on a dead-end street, you could play in the road, right? I mean, that's what we did. Different times, remember, right? Because everybody that came down the road lived there because it was dead-end. So there was a group of us playing out in the road, riding our bicycles, et cetera, and there was a car that came down the road we didn't recognize, and it dropped off a couple guys. Then the car went down to the end of the road and stopped. Didn't think too much about your kids, right? Didn't think too much about it. So a couple minutes later, these two guys come out of the house that they were in. One's carrying a TV and one's carrying a stereo. Well, of course, we know as adults that probably just got ripped, right? So they're walking down towards the car that was parked at the end of the cul-de-sac. And all of a sudden, what sounded like firecrackers lit up, and literally watched a guy's head explode about 15 feet from me, from the group of kids that was there. So the other guy took off running. Of course, he dropped the stereo and took off. The car took off. And then the one guy's laying there dead. I think there was ultimately 7 rounds that were fired out of that house, and it was with a 30-06 of all things. It wasn't like a 22 or whatever. So only by the grace of God did nobody else get hurt out of that deal. And when the Lansing Police Department came and took care of that situation, they just they treated everybody in the neighborhood phenomenally. I mean, I remember that as a kid. Probably however old you are at the time, right? 9, 10 years old. And it was very impressionable on how they did their job after that, traumatic incident. So we fast forward. My parents got divorced. My dad remarried, and he had his own set of demons, but that's neither here nor there. He ends up getting remarried, and he ended up killing his wife, or my stepmom, and then killing himself. And the law enforcement agency, which I'm not going to call out, that handled that, I was 16 at the time. The law enforcement agency that handled that did in my opinion, a very, very poor job. My dad was no saint by any stretch of the imagination. He had spent time in prison when I was younger. I didn't know that until later. He was a great dad to me in that, everybody thinks their dad is the best, right? Because that's your dad and your mom. Treated me very well, not so much, my mom. And he the law enforcement agency, tied me in with that. In other words, they looked, my dad got messed up in drugs, and he was a dealer. So they look at, oh, this is just a drug dealer's kid, right? So screw him, basically, whatever. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more to the story, but they treated me terrible. So here I am at 16, and I've got this thing in my head from way back when in the Lansing days, and now we're here. So at 16, I'm very impressionable. Really don't have a clue what I want to do, where I want to go with my life, that type of thing. So this kind of marinates over the next couple of years. I get through high school. And Williamston has a reserve program, and a police reserve program. So I thought to myself, I saw how law enforcement contact can have an impact on an individual. I think I want to try that. So I got into the reserve program. Yep, really liked it. Went to LCC, got out of the police academy, and really from that point, there was a conscious decision made to say, you know what, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy when somebody calls, when I have contact with somebody, they look at law enforcement in a little bit different light, because I've seen firsthand, the two different ways how people are treated. So
that makes sense, 100%. So that feeling probably resonated with you as a kid, that police are good. There was they're just helping tremendously here. We need these people in our community. This is important, because I'm still reflecting on the story you told. At 10 years old, you witnessed someone get shot in the head. So it was the homeowner probably grabbed his gun. He was being robbed, and a 30-06, like you said, that's game over.
Yeah, game over.
That's not a 22 that
right.
You'd be all right. It just hurt.
Right.
That's an incredible thing to witness as a young man. And then it sounds like you grew up in an environment where you witnessed a lot of craziness around you, even if you had a very good treatment from your father. So now all of a sudden you're like, you know what? There is a solution for me here. Even though I've experienced these bad things and this is going on, I can be that man to return that same feeling to other people in my community. So you start going into that, and then when did it really kick off for you? And when did you know, like, you know what, this is what I'm meant to be doing? Because we always have expectations when we go into things, but sometimes they're not accurate. When did you know that I'm going to spend my life as a police officer?
That's a great question, and I had it was probably after, or maybe during the police academy, or maybe just after. Where I, again, had, thought that, and that was the path that I wanted to head down. I don't know, and maybe it was even after that, James, to be honest with you. I don't really know when the light bulb went on to say, okay, this is definitely my destiny, this is my calling. I worked towards that, and I really never looked to, anything else or any other profession. There was times when I questioned my choice, I will tell you that. Here's another story there. So my first day out of the police academy, in Williamston, the full timers at that time could basically pay the reserves or the part timers to fill in for them, right? If they wanted a day off, that's how it worked. So I just had graduated the police academy. First day as a quote-unquote real cop, right? And one of the full-timers says, hey, I'm going to take off. I don't even remember what day it was, Tuesday, whatever. You want to work for me? I'm like, hell yes, I want to work for you, dude, right? So I get all dialed up in my, fancy little Williamston police uniform, and I got my mirrored sunglasses on, right? The Ponch and John thing. Maybe you're too young to remember, Chips. But anyways, here I am. So the shift starts, and I'm wandering around, ready to solve these murders.
Take on the world.
Yeah, solve these murders and bank robberies and all this stuff, right? And it's probably 2 hours go by, and there's nothing, dude. I can't buy a speeder. The radio's just dead. It's crazy. I'm like, huh. So then the radio pipes up and says, hey, we've got a PI, which is a personal injury accident, at the main floor. I'm like, sweet, lights and siren, woohoo, right? Here I come to save the day. So I roll up on this scene, and as the scene unfolds, it turns out that there's I think she was 13, I don't remember, 13-year-old girl that had gotten hit by a car and killed. And I'm processing this, and yes, I've had the training, and yes, this is really what I wanted to do and what I've wanted to do for my life. but hey, there's a 13-year-old girl here that's been killed. How does that, you know what I'm saying? So it really got me to kind of question, is this really the job for me? Now, I don't know that there was a time when I consciously thought, but certainly subconsciously, I remembered those two instances from before, my good experience with law enforcement and my bad experience with law enforcement, to say, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is where I need to be.
And you deal with a lot of people in really sensitive frames of mind. Imagine being the mother or the father in that incident, or in a lot of these circumstances, you are dealing with people who are having a traumatic experience.
Right.
You know, and like you said, the first time driving up to a scene, I've never seen someone pass away in person. I've never seen a dead body like that. So that is an incredibly difficult thing, you know, and it probably desensitizes some degree, you know, of your brain when you see this on a regular basis,
right,
that a lot of normal civilians don't understand. You're going to the accident scenes.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people in a traumatic event, and that's got to be difficult. What would you say, from a sheriff's perspective, is something that a lot of normal civilians don't really understand that makes your job, you know, difficult, like things like that? Because even you and I just talking right here, I'm trying to think, man, imagine my first day, and now I'm going to see someone that had just passed away from a car accident.
Right.
You can read all the books you want. You can go through all the training you want. Are you actually ready to witness that? And then have to feel the pain that the family's experiencing firsthand, you know, and they're looking to you for, you know, something. And what can you even do in that situation?
Sure. So, great question. So most cops are very, very good at compartmentalizing stuff, right? But also that leads to a lot of PTSD, or certainly can lead to a lot of PTSD, because they do compartmentalize. There has to be some sort of detachment, because if you do and you become too emotionally invested, then you're going to be a train wreck yourself, right? So for a John Q. citizen out there, I think probably the message is this. You know, we're human too, right? And I use this story sometimes. So I just came from a crash where somebody passed away, and I had to go deliver a death notification. And I just spent, you know, half an hour consoling this family and trying to explain the best I could what happened, knowing that as soon as I said that their loved one was dead, they shut down, right? So I just came from that scene, and now I'm over at your house, and I'm taking a report because your laptop got stolen out of your car. And, you know, you're mad because I didn't call out CSI, and I don't seem like I really care, and, you know, unempathetic and whatever. And, you know, at the end of the day, I really don't care that much, because my brain is still trying to process what just happened before, right? So, you know, I think from a law enforcement perspective, one of the things that, again, that the public doesn't understand is we ride an emotional roller coaster every day with the things that we have to deal with. So one of the things that I've really, really tried to stress with my men and women is, listen, you gotta have some outlet. You cannot let this job consume you, whatever that is, right? I mean, we're in your studio. There's a lot of folks that are into weightlifting and working out and stuff like that. That's awesome. There's a lot of my people that are big time, you know, hunters and runners, and awesome. But you gotta have something outside of the business, because if you don't, it'll chew you up and spit you out.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, when you're witnessing a death and having to tell that to a mother, a father, a son, you know, and then you have to go make a report on a stolen item, to the person who just had their item stolen, they're furious. They think it's the worst. It might be the worst day of their year.
Absolutely.
Right, but you're processing something that's so, you know, much more difficult. That makes perfect sense. And I've always thought, when I was younger, I had a couple bad experiences with what I felt like my rights being violated, where like I had certain rights and I wasn't treated as, or I was treated like a young kid, like whatever, you know what I mean? And it gave me a distaste towards police for a little bit. But then as I got older and I started to really look back at my experiences, is that a bad? Are police bad, or did I have a bad experience with people? And then when you're young, you're not really good at taking yourself out of your shoes and putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Maybe that officer had the worst day of his life. Maybe he just came from a horrific event, or he's facing extreme difficulty that I don't understand. So yeah, we have a bad experience, but it's not out because he's a bad person. It's not he could be a good person 9 out of 10 times. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think it's really good for people to take a step back and realize, by not walking in someone's shoes, you don't really understand understand what they've gone through to get to that point. You know, let's talk about some of the things with 2020, you know, that have gone on, because you've been in an incredibly difficult situation. So back in March, you know, we got the executive order passed down. I mean, just in general, everybody was told to quarantine. I did the same thing. I closed the gym for 6 weeks. Sure. Everybody was hiding from the scary virus that we didn't really know much about, right? So everyone was in a state of confusion. Now, what is it like to be the highest level of enforcement in the county, where everybody is kind of looking to your leadership and your advice when information is rapidly changing? Like, let's just talk about, what was this experience like for you? Because I know it was like for me as a business owner. I know it was like for me as a family man, as a person, as a friend. You know, what was it like to be caught in the middle of the situation? You're getting hundreds of executive orders thrown your way. You have one side of the population demanding that you uphold the Constitution. There hasn't been, you know, these laws have not gone through legislation. You have the other side of the population that wants caution and safety beyond anything. What was that experience like as a sheriff? I can't imagine the stress you must have been going through.
Yeah, so I got a few extra gray hairs out of the deal. No question about that. You know, the first 6 weeks though was relatively calm, quite frankly, because everybody got it, right.
We all just went caution.
Everybody bought into it. Hey, listen, we got to flatten the curve. It's a lockdown. We get it. So, you know, that first go-round wasn't too bad. Where it got crazy and where it started to get sticky was after that first 6 weeks, or whatever the time was. I don't recall offhand. But then, you know, to your point, I mean, you've got executive orders basically coming out every 2-3 days. So if you think about an operation my size, it's 24/7. My guys work 12-hour shifts, so they work 2 days, they're off 2 days, they work 3, they're off 2, then they're off 3. You know, just keeping everybody educated on the orders was almost impossible, if not impossible, right? And then, you know, as you pointed out, you've got the public out there. So that first 6 weeks wasn't bad at all, frankly. Once things started to open up a little bit, I had made the decision that I wasn't going to, after the governor extended her emergency powers without the legislature's approval. That's when I said, you know what, yeah, no, I'm not really going to go down that road, because that's not how this is supposed to work, even though they, you know, she pointed to the 1945 law or whatever, right? And frankly, not to get off on a tangent, but it was kind of ironic that, you know, during this whole shutdown, you're only talking about essential stuff being open, but yet you could buy beer, you could buy pot, you could buy lotto tickets, you could buy cigarettes, and the reason for that is because it's tax money, right? So of course the state's not going to lose out on that. But anyways, I digress. And well, okay, I'll go off on a little bit more of a nut, but you know, I can go into Home Depot and go get a 2x4, but I can't go down the paint aisle. Okay, how does that make sense? But whatever. So it got to the point where I said, listen, I'm not going to subject my men and women to enforcing these orders that A, are changing on an every other day basis, B, are probably not constitutional to begin with, and as we find out, they weren't. So that was a right call. Could have been the wrong call, but at the time, that was the call that I made. I'm just not going to do that. And frankly, it's kind of ironic that I'm sitting here, because it was when I came out publicly and said that I'm not going to do anything, it was as a result of you opening up your gym, right? So I got a call from the Livingston County Press, and they said, "Hey, there's this guy over there in Brighton that's going to open up his gym, you know, Monday or whatever. What are you going to do?" It was
actually May 1st, the day that the legislature determined all of her rules were null and void. As of May 1st, May 1st was the day. I don't know if that's just pure universe luck or whatever that was, or God being like, "Hey, I got your back on that one." But yeah, it was May 1st, and man, the amount of reporters, and I made the national Fox News, which I would have never wanted to do in my entire life.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So sorry to interrupt. But.
Yeah, no, but that's how it came about, because they called me and said, "Whoa, hey, Sheriff, what are you gonna do?" And nothing. And there was kind of silence on the end of the line. She's like, "Well, what do you mean nothing?" And I said, "Nothing. You know, if the state wants to do any enforcement or whatever, then they can do whatever they want to do, but it ain't coming out of this office." So, anyways, I took a lot of heat for that, obviously, but I took heat from a few different perspectives. One, that it was political, and it wasn't political. There's no question I'm a Republican. sometimes I try to rethink that one sometimes too. But at any rate, if it was Snyder that was in office or whoever, you cannot essentially be a dictator. And that's what I saw this being. So it wasn't political. It's just it was the right thing to do. And the other thing is I think a lot of people don't understand the way those executive orders were. There was a set that was done under the governor, but there was also a set that was done under the health department, and they had two very different paths on how any sort of prosecution happened, right? To make matters, to make it even more complicated, and keep in mind that they're changing every, 2, 3, 4 days, there's some of them were 93-day misdemeanors, and in the police world, what that means is if I have probable cause and it's a crime that's 93 days, punishable by 93 days or more, I can make an arrest, a physical arrest, without witnessing it, right? So I do my investigation and I say, you know what, James Gray did X, Y, and Z. If I believe that, I got probable cause, I can arrest you, okay? Part of those things were 90-day misdemeanors. And in the police world, what that means is I cannot do that unless I witness that, right? So, yeah, I really believe that James Gray did this, but I got to send that report to the prosecutor. They need to make a determination, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if I witness it, then that's a different story, right? And then you take it one step further, and, everybody's talking about, well, enforce the mask order, enforce the mask. There is no enforcement. There just simply is not enforcement on that because it's not, there's no statute or anything that gives any authority to write a ticket. There's no fine attached. There's no jail time. So I could literally go up to you and say, hey, dude, you got to wear a mask. And you say, bite me. And okay, what do I do? I can't write you a ticket. I can't arrest you. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So there was a ton of things going on at this time. And, here's how I look at things. The people in this county elected me to do a job. I answer to them. My report card comes in every 4 years when I either get reelected or they fire me, right? It's just that simple. So there was a lot of people asking a ton of questions on X, Y, and Z, and those are rabbit holes that I just don't go down, quite frankly. Listen, you had trust and confidence in me to do my job. You elected me to do my job. Let me do my job. If you're not happy with my job, then fire me after 4 years, right? But so my point in saying all that is what I just discussed here. There's no way that I could have came out and said anything like that at the time and not got blasted by more people than I already got blasted by, right? And one other thing, as long as we're talking about the governor and the attorney general and this whole thing, we had a conversation pretty early on with specifically her, the health director, and the attorney general about the enforcement of the executive orders. And when I say we, there was a handful of sheriffs on the call, the colonel of state police was on the call, I forget who else, but they were wanting essentially buy-in, right? And I said, listen, when you guys came out with this, and then you guys, the government, the state, when you came out with these executive orders, you said the attorney general was going to be the one that was going to do the enforcement. That lasted about a hot minute and realized that that overwhelmed the system. So then you say, well, now we're going to rely on local law enforcement, contact your local law enforcement. Well, A, we were never brought to the table on the front end, nor were we brought to the table on the front end on any of this, even to this day, not on the front end. We had found out about the changes in executive orders. We had found out about all the changes the same time the public did, which that's kind of crappy if you ask me. But anyways, again, I digress. So my suggestion was, hey, listen, now that we're into this is probably, I'm going to guess about June. I'm not really sure when we had this conversation. I said, I got an idea for you. How about this? If you're really looking for enforcement of these things, of these executive orders, why don't you redirect some resources of the state police? Because I'm going to make all my state police friends mad out there, but hey, sorry, guys, I love you. And we have a great relationship. But my point to the governor was this. You've got 83 sheriffs in the state of Michigan. let the sheriffs and their people, let the local municipalities concentrate on doing police work. Because if you remember, now we have opened up, right? So what happened in the first six weeks-ish, where everybody locked down, there was nothing going on. I mean, I literally probably could have gave my entire staff 6 weeks off because there really wasn't nothing going on. But we've gotten to the point now, June, July, August, where things are opening back up. People are being people. There's crime being committed. You know, we've got a job to do on that end. So how about this? How about we, local law enforcement and sheriffs, take care of criminal stuff that's going on? Why don't you redirect some resources from the state police and do a task force, or just direct all the troopers? Hey, listen, don't go sit on the expressway anymore and write tickets. You know, don't answer any other calls. You just worry about the executive order stuff, because ultimately at the end of the day too, if I were to do any enforcement and get sued, guess who's paying that? The Livingston County taxpayers are going to pay to defend that. But the state police and the governor, they have the attorney general's office who's already there, so they're going to defend that. So it just made sense to me that if you want this done, you know, that you rely on essentially your police to do that. And you know, I got the we'll take that under advisement, and that's about as far as that went. So whatever. So I went off on a little bit of a tangent, so I apologize.
No, it's good information. And when you're in those situations where you have to make a really difficult decision like that, where does the faith in your decision come from? Like, because you have to make a decision. A lot of people in this world are very indecisive. They don't, you know, if they're put in that spot, they just won't know what to do. So a lot of times they'll either do nothing or they'll turn to somebody else. How do you, being the guy, make those decisions and feel confident in them?
You know, great question. And, you know, for as many decisions that I've made that were right, I've made just as many that were wrong, right? I mean, that's just the way that it goes. But I've never been one to shy away from a decision, and not really sure where that comes from. Is just kind of my, you know, kind of my makeup. You know, my history, when I hired into the sheriff's office, I actually hired into the jail. And I worked there for a while, even though I was already a road certified guy. That was my foot in the door. Worked there for a while and got to kind of see the lay of the land. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to be sheriff someday. So, you know, 25, almost 30, yeah, little less than 30 years ago. Because my whole makeup, my whole DNA has always been this. If you see something that's wrong, or you see something that you can improve on, or you see a way to change things, then be a part of the solution, not the problem, right? Don't be that guy or gal that just complains. You know, the boss has got their head in their rear end, you know, blah, 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 whatever. So every promotion that I took and every step that I took was with that end goal to make things better, to have a, you know, to have a positive impact. So I've never been afraid to make a decision. And if you make I truly believe this, if you make a decision based on what you know is right, even if it hurts, it's the right decision, right? When you've, a buddy of mine, a former sheriff over in Calhoun, make the right decision at the right time for the right reasons, it's the right decision, right? And it's just, yeah, it's just that way. And that kind of comes with law enforcement as a whole, too, because most cops are not very indecisive. I mean, there are some, right? But most cops are decisive because, let's face it, we get called to a situation to resolve it. Whether it's a dispute between two people, whether it's a crime, whatever it is. I mean, nobody calls us up and invites us for coffee, right? That's just not how it works. Nobody calls us up just to say, hey, how's your day? We deal with people in crisis because that's what we do. So we are decision makers, I think, just kind of naturally. Yeah, so. You
also touched on another topic, the mask topic right now, because there's, again, a huge divide, just another way where you have the mask group and then you have the non-mask, like the freedom or the no, you need to enforce this. My understanding is that, like, businesses can set their own rules, right? I mean, that they have the right to be able to say, hey, you can't enter this business without a mask, and then you could enforce that. Like if Walmart was to say, we are not allowing someone to shop here that doesn't wear a mask. You went in without a mask, then the police could get involved, right? Because, or is there not enforcement just across the board because it has not gone through the legislature, so it's not an official law, and that's how laws are created.
So kind of, sort of, right? So the answer to the question is the enforcement comes from a trespassing standpoint. So you as a business owner can set whatever rules you want on your business. I don't want women in here. I don't want men in here. I don't want...
Wait, can you make those type of rules?
Yes, you can.
Really?
You're going to get sued, but you can do it.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, there has to be some... That's hilarious. You're going to get sued.
You're going to get sued, but you can do it. So, but anyways, my point, and you know, to draw the parallel for CPL holders, right? So as a business owner, you can say, no weapons in here, right, as a private business owner. I don't care if you got a CPL or not. You're not coming in my store. You're not coming in my place of business with a gun. It's my store. That's the same thing with the mask. So when that call would look like this. Hey, partner, you got to put a mask on. And you say, well, I'm not wearing a mask because A, I don't believe in it. It's a free country, whatever your response is. Or B, you've got health issues that, you know, prevent you from wearing a mask. My response is, I don't really care. You're not coming in my store without a mask. So I'm asking you to leave, or I'm going to call law enforcement. And if you say, okay, I'm leaving, great, problem solved. If you say, nope, screw you, I'm going to come in your store, law enforcement arrives, we're going to approach you and say, dude, the owner told you that you got to put a mask on. And you say, you know what, I'm not putting a mask on for whatever reason. I'm going to say, then you need to leave. And if you say, okay, I'll leave, problem solved. If you say, I'm not leaving because it's a free country, you're probably going to jail, or at least you're getting a ticket for trespassing. So it's a trespassing is where it comes in, not the mask.
That makes sense. Now, as much as you said that, you know, there could be a lawsuit about business laws, could you refuse someone's service that has a medical condition that can't wear a mask? Because you're going to have a lot of people that are not able to wear a mask that have medical issues. Are you allowed to tell them, hey, sorry, you have this medical condition, you're not welcome in the store? That feels like a slippery slope right there.
So again, you're going to get sued, right? I mean, I know if it were me, and I'm certainly not advocating any work for the attorneys out there, but if it were me and I had a legitimate health reason why I could not wear a mask and I was refused service as a result of that, that would be an interesting lawsuit, quite frankly. You know, I just did see, gosh, I can't remember.
I mean, imagine if you got groceries your entire life, right? The same way you've done things your entire life.
Forever.
If anything, we're more cautious now than ever, but you go to your store to get your groceries for your family like you have, and they say, no, you need to get out of here, or you have to put a mask on. You have a medical condition that doesn't allow you to do so, and then they refuse you. I mean, that is definitely a dangerous slope to go down.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's ever happened, quite frankly. I mean, I was in, today, for example, I'm in the post office, and there was a person in line that didn't have a mask on. I'm in full uniform. I never questioned her. The post office never questioned her. She just did her business and got out of there, right? I've been into the you know, the Walmarts of the world, the Meijers of the world, the Krogers of the world, and saw people without masks. They're not. I don't think anybody's. I don't think anybody's looking to call anybody out, right? I think most people, out of respect, myself included, quite frankly, I'm not a mask guy. But I am a mask guy to the extent that if I go into a grocery store, if I go into some place that's public like that, I wear a mask. It's just that, you know, I just do. Interestingly enough, not to get off on a tangent on that, but I just recently got over COVID, which was kind of ironic.
I need you to tell me about the experience, by the way, because I've been hearing it's the plague. No, I mean, initially we were told it's the plague, it's the apocalypse. There's a 3 to 10% mortality rate. Obviously, that, thank God, turned out to be far from true. But what was your actual experience? Because how old are you, sir?
Yeah, 53.
You're 53 years old. I mean, you are in good shape. You take care of yourself. But what was your experience with COVID like? This year, the first person I've really sat down and talked about it.
Yeah, so mine, frankly, was very mild, right? I had some body aches for a few days, kind of a dull headache, runny nose, lost my taste and smell, which kind of stunk. Lost a few pounds because, you know, I had to eat because I was hungry, but I couldn't taste the food. But, you know, this I've talked to a number of people who had it, and it's some of it seems to do a little bit with age. But I personally believe, and certainly I'm not a medical guy, right? But I think it's a lot to do with genetics, you know. Like we had one of the gals in my shop had COVID, and it was not a real good experience for her, and she's younger than I am. I know people that ultimately ended up in the hospital on a vent. You know, I don't know personally anybody that has died, thank goodness. But at the end of the day, it really kind of seems to run the gambit on what the experience have been with people that have had it. So for me personally, and for my wife, very, very mild. You know, not a huge deal. But anyways, to get back to the whole mask thing and stuff, I am respectful of that, right? I know there are people out there that are immune compromised. As a matter of fact, I think I took extra care to be careful, because I have a mom who had just spent 8 weeks in the hospital, totally unrelated COVID-wise, but my point is she very immune compromised, right? So the last thing I want to do is pass that off to my parent or my stepdad or anybody for that matter. So, you know, I am a mask guy when I go out, but I'm not a mask guy when I'm at home and I'm around, you know what I mean? I'm not going to wear the thing 24/7, certainly, so.
No, that makes sense. And, you know, for everyone that's listening to the podcast or whenever you end up watching this, I want you to know Mike reached out to me in advance and said, hey, you know, I came out under the weather a little before Thanksgiving. I want to make sure that we're outside of the window of time. So we waited. We rescheduled this podcast. We waited till he was cleared to go back in. I mean, technically, we could have done it yesterday or so. But we took the caution just to play it safe. You know what I mean? Like our entire lives, what you've done if you had influenza or anything that could be spread to people is when you're sick and you have symptoms, you stay home. And as soon as you're good, you go back out in life. Right. We're taking the extra precautions now just because there is a lot of, you know, chaos surrounding this and the information is changing constantly. Like the WHO just dropped their recommendation down to only 3 days after symptoms expire now is like the latest thing that they did. A friend of mine that works at the local hospital, St. Joe's, sent it over and said, hey, now it's just saying 3 days after symptoms expire. You know what I mean? So there's things we can do naturally to just play it safe. We've been doing it with my guys. We've had several people that get it, and they've all luckily had it very mild cases. But we're like, hey, just stay home, just take 10 days off, 2 weeks off, enjoy yourself, and then you can come back. We're not going anywhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? So knowing that you were going to be on the podcast, I reached out to a couple people on the team and I said, hey, you know, like our sheriff is coming in. Are there any questions you'd want to bring up to him or that you'd want to ask or get perspective on? And I got some good ones. One that came up right off the bat that I want to address is we had that Black Lives Matter protest happen this summer and the gathering down in Howell that went very peacefully. But from your perspective with that coming in, you know, just give me your perspective on the Black Lives Matter thing, because I know that obviously you're a huge supporter of the First Amendment. You want people to always be able to peaceably assemble. You have the freedom of speech. These are all good things. And then there was weird tension between, like, you know, militia people were saying like, we're going to be there. Just give me your whole experience with the BLM protest. Were you happy with the results? You know, did you support the movements, things like that?
Yeah, so I was very happy with the results, quite frankly. And, you know, one of the things, I'll give a plug for all of public safety in Livingston County. We work extremely well together. Police, fire, EMS, dispatch. And I think that comes as a result of just being a small county. So we rely on each other, right? We rely on Pinckney PD. They rely on us, and the list goes on and on. So we, public safety, had several conversations prior to the protest coming, right? We had plan A through double Z pretty much, and I can assure you, for just about every protester that was there was a cop around somewhere, right? Whether you knew they were a cop or not. So we were pretty well covered. But so no, it did have a good outcome. Totally fine with people peaceably assembling, right? That's never been an issue, and frankly, that's the only way that we get things done in this country, when somebody is willing to take the torch and say, you know what, I'm very passionate about this, whatever this is, and I want some movement on this. That's how we get things done here. But you know, when we go sideways and we start using it as a free-for-all and as a excuse or yeah, that's a.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it turned into riots in cities. It turned into police getting run over by cars. It turned into people being attacked, business owners having all their things taken. I mean, I watched videos on YouTube that made me sick to my stomach. I watched an officer shot and killed in Missouri live on Facebook. Right. I mean, live on Facebook, he bled out and died on the sidewalk. And I mean, so I 100% understand what you're saying. Listen, you have the freedom to assemble. You have the right to. Thank God for the civil rights movement. Thank God for the progress we've made as a society. Thank God we've shown successfully that we've gotten better with time. Right. We're more together more than ever through social media, through, you know, just the world is connected now, and we want these positive changes. But absolutely, you need to be held to some standards, and that's from every side. It's not just the people protesting.
Yeah, for sure.
The people that react to a protest. If you go there and turn violent on the protesters, you're as much a part of the problem. You would agree?
Too. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But overall, would you say that it went by without much incident at all? Like, I wasn't closely following them, but I don't remember any real incidents of violence in this community or anything like that.
No, we fared pretty well. And, you know, I don't do a podcast thing, but I do, I've got some Facebook posts out there, you know, that I do my best to try to educate or, you know, explain to the public, whatever. And, you know, I came out prior to that protest, and because there were some grumblings, there was actually somebody from, it wasn't from the area, that had called kind of on all the militia folks to come, you know, protect Howell, because this, you know, Black Lives Matter protest is going to be out there, and, you know, they're going to, you know, rape and pillage and burn and blah, blah, blah. And my reply to that, my plea really on Facebook was, listen, don't do that. Leave us alone, right? Law enforcement, we've got this. Like I said, we had met a number of times previous. That's what we get paid to do. We've got resources to handle this. Just let us handle this. Please don't be the gas on the ember, right? And fortunately, there were some folks that came out, but they were, you know, they didn't have their battle rattle on. They didn't have their AK-47 strung across their chest and that type of thing. So it was very peaceful. And I look at our population here in Livingston County, and I am so grateful to be the sheriff here. Honestly, I really am, because we have a great community. You know, no matter what the issue is, there may be times when we disagree with each other or whatever, but John Q. Public, for the most part, in Livingston County, they want to go to work, they want to come home, they want to raise their family, they want a peaceful existence, and they're intelligent, right? So I really wasn't worried about a protest from our folks. We in law enforcement were really concerned about, you know, the outside influence, right? About people being bussed in and that type of stuff. And that's where things tend to get sticky, because they're not vested in the community, right? The people in our community, the last thing they want to do is burn their community down, right? So it was interesting. There was several protests, but the main one that happened on, I forget what day it was, June, whatever. It was scheduled to go till, I can't remember if it was 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, something like that. And the organizer, I guess I'll call it, they were leading some chants and they were doing their thing, and they had been for a while. But it was interesting because about 15 minutes before the end of the time, you know, she's on her bullhorn, blah, blah, blah. Hey, 15 minutes and this thing's wrapping up, you know, and then they go through some more chants and do their thing, whatever. 5 minutes and this thing's wrapping up and blah, blah, blah. And then, okay, and honestly, it was just like, oh, okay, everybody just grabbed their backpacks and whatever they had, and they kind of dispersed, and they were all gone in about 15, well, maybe a half hour. So it was beautiful. It really was. That's what that's how a protest is run, and that's how I wish there were other places around the country that would have taken that example, but that's not it. You know, people see an opportunity. I mean, you look at there's just evil people out there in the world, right? I mean, look at natural disasters. Look at Katrina. How many people use that as an excuse to lose their mind, to go loot, to go destroy, to go burn? It's like a free-for-all. What are you thinking? You know, what are you thinking? Come on.
100%. And I think it's really good to hear you say that, because I think a lot of people were starting to well, let's just say they were putting bad information out there, saying that, like, okay, the sheriff is trying to drum up all the militia and get their support, and he wants to make sure that he suppresses these people. That is not all the case. You were like, I believe in your right to assemble. We've made incredible progress throughout history by doing so. We just have to be respectful. People live here. This is our community. There's little kids. I saw children go into the town. You know what I mean? So we need to take care of our home, and we need to listen to the voices of the people, but it has to be done in the correct fashion. It is great to hear that, like, it was organized. Yeah. It was a countdown, and it said, you know what? We were here. We showed our support. We spoke, you know, into the future for what we desire, but we did it in the right way. It's wonderful to hear. One thing I was...
well, let me just... One last comment on that. So, you know, I think people, whether it's that issue or any issue, I would just encourage this. Protests are great. Assemblies are great, whatever. But don't just do that, right? Get involved. And so one of the things, there was a... Chilson Hills Church, myself and a couple of black pastors from Detroit had a conversation about, you know, this was probably... I don't even know, July, I don't remember when it was, but earlier this summer, about the whole race relations and law enforcement and whatever. And the question was, well, what can we do about it? Find a passion that you have and get involved. You know, that's really what it is. Don't get on Facebook and, you know, MF somebody. Don't get on other social media platforms and just, you know, have keyboard testosterone and write crazy stuff. You know, don't go to a protest and, you know, scream and holler and make an idiot out of yourself just to make yourself feel better for that day. Get involved. You know, if you want to be a change agent, then be a change agent. But I think too many people say, well, you know, I support this cause because I showed up at a rally. Yeah? Well, what'd you do after that? Well, what do you mean? Well, what'd you do after the rally? Well, nothing. I went to the rally. Oh, okay. Big deal, right?
It's actually the same spirit that when you said you got into law enforcement to change lives and have a positive impact, it's the same thing. If you really believe in a cause, then you should champion that cause.
Absolutely.
And you should give as much as you can of your energy to that cause and try to bring people in line with good information, with resources, with showing them the vision of why you're supporting this. That's how we make real change.
Yeah, for sure.
As soon as you start MFing somebody online and screaming at people, all they do is cut the cord of communication. They don't want to listen to you anymore. They're not even going to consider your point of view. Right. You could be right, right, but they're not even going to consider it.
Right.
One thing that I was talking about recently with my cousin, who's the officer in Philadelphia, that it baffled me when he told me this. He told me that the clearance rate for murders and violent crimes currently in this country is somewhere around 50 or 60%. And yet our technology, back in the 90s, it was in the 90%. Our technology has come such an incredibly, you know, we were talking about technology before this podcast. We've developed so far. We have DNA. We have cameras everywhere. Everything is tapped. I mean, you would think that if you murdered someone nowadays, or if you're at any violent crime, that you're getting busted hands down. But yet it seems like a large demographic of the people that are in prison aren't those people. We need to, you know, in a perfect world, you get 100% murder rate. You murder someone, you're going to prison.
Right.
Like, we grew up believing in that ideal, right? Like, if bad people go away, right? Why is it that a number like that is so vital, like a citizen would hear that, and that's terrifying? You're like, are you telling me almost half of violent offenders do not end up in jail? Do you have any insight or reasoning into that? And I'm sure it's not that in Livingston County. That might be more of a Philadelphia statistic.
Yeah.
But do you have any insight into that topic?
So I don't, because I can only kind of, you know, my world is Livingston County. You know, I would venture a guess that it probably looks something like this. A lot of the crime in the big cities, the violent crime, is perpetrated on a segment of society that is susceptible to that. And specifically what I mean by that is, you know, gangbangers, you know, drug dealers, people that are in that kind of world. So when there's a homicide, you know, it's one thing to have somebody that's gunned down on the street or maybe in a break-in or something like that. I think if you were able to separate out those statistics and say, okay, of the crimes like that, the violent crimes, versus the drive-by shooting or, you know, those type of things, what's the percentage there? So that would just be my guess, but again, that's just absolutely a guess.
And even in things like that, I mean, there's drugs in every major city. I mean, there's drugs everywhere. They plague our society. They're everywhere. You have drug dealers. You have violent people. to me, it is shocking that we aren't able to put more of those people behind bars. Yeah. I mean, because we have cameras everywhere. We have technology everywhere. I don't understand, and I'm not in that field, why it's so difficult to get people that are doing evil in society into jail for a significant period of time, or into some type of thing that keeps our community safe or changes life. You know, you understand my frustration. No, I don't really know how to articulate this. But
so let me just say this. It's interesting you say that, and I feel absolutely 100% the same way you did. Going back to my story before, I told you my dad was a drug dealer, right? So, you know, I saw that firsthand. Again, I didn't know it at the time, but I saw the carnage, of course, of what that resulted in. But it's interesting that we as a society have kind of taken this stance that, you know, drug dealers and suppliers, it's kind of a victimless crime. And the people that are using are kind of, it's an addiction, it's a disability as opposed to, you know, a crime. And if you look at Oregon, for crying out loud, just legalized hard drugs in small amounts. I don't know what that is, but cocaine, legal. Heroin, legal. Fentanyl, legal. Are you freaking kidding me? You know, in small amounts for personal use or whatever. In my world, I have seen, and this is why I'm so, you know, dead set on drugs, but in my world, I've seen the carnage that leaves behind. I've seen the impact that that's had on families. And I will tell you this, you know, I would hazard a guess to say that well over 90% of the people in the Livingston County Jail right now are there as a result of substance abuse problems. And when I say that, it may not be that charge, right? But they're in jail for B&E. Why are they in jail for B&E? Because they broke into a place to steal stuff, to sell it, to support their habit, right? Or they're in jail on an assault charge. Why? Because they got all doped up and they beat the crap out of somebody or whatever, right? So the root there is the drugs. So there's also a movement to, you know, get these people out of prison. And, you know, it makes a great headline, you know, oh, this guy spent, you know, 15 years in prison. He's finally getting released because he was selling marijuana. So if you just read that headline without doing a deeper dive, you go, well, how do you end up with 15 years in prison for marijuana? Come on now. Well, then you go and you look at the court records and you pull the police reports and you say, you know, he was arrested, first of all, 20 times. And the last time it was because he had, you know, 100 bales of marijuana in the back of a semi truck, for crying out, or whatever it is, right? So, no, I'm not a big fan of drugs.
No, same. Like I said, I've witnessed in my friends' lives, I know people that have overdosed. Drugs ravage communities, yeah. But yet they're in every single community. And I've heard the arguments that people should be able to experiment with their own psychology as they want. But listen, your grandmother, the bank teller, is less likely to destroy society or kill someone compared to a drug dealer. That's a fact. And if that upsets you, that's just statistically speaking. Maybe your friend, the drug dealer, has never killed someone, has never harmed someone, has never, you know, you get it. But statistically speaking, it is a much higher chance for that person to be ruining society or pushing us in a direction that we don't want to go. Recently, we had Megan Reckling on the podcast. You know Megan?
Yeah, of course.
She was speaking about that they are working towards like expungement and stuff on people's records for nonviolent crimes and stuff to get them back into society, because there is a certain, like, when you're young, you make mistakes.
Sure.
You've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. There is a certain level of, if we put shit on people and it sticks to them forever, maybe they never kind of get back on track and, like, you know, get their life together and try to be a contributing member of society. So I do think there is a case in the right circumstances to say, hey, can we help this person? Is this person a victim of some degree that we can help get back on track? But there's also, you need to prosecute criminals. That statement, I actually think in some cities might piss people off. You need to prosecute criminals. If you are a felon that is repeatedly doing things to people, to society, and harming people, you need to go to jail. I don't know how else to express that. I mean, you know, I'm probably not being politically correct right now, but you need to be prosecuted. So we need to define clear lines. It's back to like that good and evil thing. There's a difference between someone that fell into a bad thing that needs help, and there's a, you know, someone perpetrating crimes against people and civilians that need to be put away. We need to define those lines.
Yeah, no question. So here's the deal. So there's a big movement along with what I just mentioned, but there's a big movement for criminal justice reform, right? That the expungement being part of that, which is all fine and dandy. However, you know, we have an imperfect system, no question about it. But it's imperfect because we have discretion. And the prosecutor has discretion, the judges have discretion. Those folks are elected officials. Remember that, right? Just like me, I get a report card every 4 years, as do they. So, you know, we need to police, we need to adjudicate by what the people in this particular county want, right? So you cannot, we live in this world where everything needs to fit into a nice little box. That's not always the case, right? So when you're looking at expungements, when you're looking at crimes that people commit, you need to be able to look at those circumstances, because James Gray that went out and shoplifted for the first time, never has anything, you know, any issues, whatever. Dude, you don't need to go to jail. Come on, you know. Mike Murphy, on the other hand, same thing. I stole the same thing. I shoplifted the same thing. But yet I've been in front of the judge, you know, 27 times for other stuff. Dude, you need to go to jail. You know what I mean? That's how the system is designed. So when you try to do a matrix or, you know, fit something into a box, it just doesn't work that way. So I'm a huge proponent of having the ability and the discretion to be able to see justice through with all the circumstances, all the totality of the circumstances in mind.
So it's more important to get the right people in the positions of authority that are going to use that discretion. You know what I mean?
I think so.
I won't even put the judge out there that recently just went through that horrible thing here in this county that, you know, the wrong people can end up in positions.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? So it is an imperfect system. We are working to do our best, but at the end of the day, like, we do need to support certain ideals. An ideal of a criminal being should go to jail is something that I support 100%. I don't know if everybody else does, but 100%.
You know, and I'll get on my soapbox for half a second too on that particular issue. What's happened, I think, in our country, frankly, is we've gotten away from personal responsibility, right? There's very few people in jail or prison that will admit they did whatever they did. There are some, there's no question. But everybody always wants to shift the blame or point the finger. I'm a victim. Because of my circumstances. You know what? Nobody grew up in a Stepford family. Nobody did. Everybody's got issues. Everybody's got trials and tribulations. Life is not fair. And if anybody ever told you life was fair, they're lying to you. It's just that simple, right? So somewhere you need to take personal responsibility, and you need to have a moral compass that allows you to do that. And when you have parents that are more concerned about being friends with their kids as opposed to being parents, that's when we start to get sideways, right? Because you're not teaching that kid anything other than, you know, if I tell you to do your homework and you don't do your homework, there's no consequences. If I tell you to take out the trash and you don't take out the trash, there's no consequences. So right from the get-go, this kid is learning there's no consequences for doing wrong. So then when law enforcement has to step in and say, no, dude, you did wrong, and guess what? Turn around, put your hands behind your back. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, well, hey, that, you know, not my fault. I didn't do that. Whatever, you know, they're the victim. So
you are so spot on, and we could go on about that forever.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Because I see it all the time. Personal responsibility, looking in the mirror and realizing that, like, you're probably in control of 90% of the things that happen to you, or at least the way that you react to them.
Absolutely.
You are in control. The people that you choose to have in your life, the way you choose to live your life, the energy you put out, where you put your focus, 100%. And I think if we got back to that and the moral compass, it's like I don't kill people, right? Not because there's a law that says don't kill someone. That's not why I'm not. It's because in morality, I know that it's wrong to injure other people.
Right.
I don't not do all of these things that we have laws for because, oh, well, you know what? I could get caught. It's because it makes sense.
Right.
I get why the law was written. You don't murder me, I won't murder you. It's a better, healthier society, right? So a lot of the times it is so much easier to just be like, you know, well, this shouldn't be that way, instead of just like, should you have done that? Should you have been acting that way? Right. Was it pure coincidence that the police ended up involved in your life? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
You can get profiled, for sure. You can get targeted. You can be treated unfairly. But again, that's starting to isolate those events and say, was that a bad experience with a law enforcement officer? Right. Or was this an entire system that needs to crumble? Speaking of which, I'll bring this up very slightly. We saw defund the police being a huge movement. We saw ACAB. The first time I saw that online, I said, what is ACAB? All cops are bastards. I was speechless. I called my cousin Shane that same day, and I go, that has to be the dumbest thing I've read on the internet in a while, and the internet's dumb. Because you're having a group of people that are saying we are being treated unfairly and being stereotyped against, and police brutality is, you know, is ravaging these certain communities and colors and all different things. Like there's a bunch that probably went into the creation of that. You are stereotyping police, people you don't know, with a theory without ever meeting them. With never meeting my cousin Shane, who's a wonderful father, husband, phenomenal human being I grew up with, great man, but you're stereotyping him because of the occupation he has. How do we get to these silly ideologies? And the way is, man, when you start to point outward instead of inward.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
That's how you get to it. We need to get back to personal responsibility. We need to get back to morality. We need to get back to family structure first, which then leads to better community structure, which leads to better interaction together. And I bet you a lot of the world's problems would start to fix themselves.
Yeah.
Instead, when you scream at the internet or you go online and you make big Facebook counter posts to something you don't like, you're not pushing the needle in the right direction. You know what I'm saying? So we could go on forever about that. But when you were hearing this defund the police, how does that make you feel as a man that you got into this to try to go back to that feeling that resonated with you as a child? You said, I'm going to make an impact. My life is going to have a little bit of meaning, and I'm going to try to make things a little bit better. Now you have people pushing defund people like you, basically saying you, hey, your life's work is not important and we don't need you, or all cops are bastards. What was that period like? Or did...
Yeah, so a couple things. Circling back to the whole law thing, you know, we are a society of laws, right? We need laws, but you know what? At the end of the day, laws are pretty much just for honest people, right? If you think about it. And if you think about this too, we have never, ever legislated our way out of anything. Think about that for a minute, right? We've never legislated. So it really truly does come from the heart, and it does come from personal responsibility. So circling back to the, you know, all cops are bastards and defund the police, I know, you know, one of the cool things about being sheriff, and I mentioned this before, is I'm elected, so I serve at the pleasure of the people, and I don't answer to anybody other than the people that put me in office. The police chiefs are a little bit different, and they have a city council or a manager or whoever they have to listen to. But I've said this before. I know exactly how I would have handled the thing in Minneapolis if I was the police chief there. I would have said, you know what? There's a call out there to defund us. And listen, I'm not going to make excuses for what my officer did. Totally wrong. He's going to have his day in court just like everybody else. I'm comfortable he'll be convicted, and then we'll get done with that. That's not the way he was trained. That's not what we expect from our officers. However, to defund the police is ludicrous. So if you truly want to know what that's going to look like, I'm going to tell you what. You know what? It's 20 minutes after 3 right now. I've given my entire staff the week off. We're done. We'll see you next Friday at 3:20.
Don't call us.
Let me know how that works out for you. It's all shut down. You'd have anarchy, you know. So when that first started, it was literally defund the police. Now, if you've watched what's happened.